All right, welcome back, everyone. Please be sure to engage with other attendees by using the studio chat located underneath the video panel. Also, if you have any questions for our presenter, please type your questions into the Q&A tab located underneath the slides. And now I want to jump in right away and introduce our speaker, Garrett Jestice, who is the head of marketing at Lucidpress. Today, he will show us how to empower your team to build a brand that earns the confidence and loyalty of your audience. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into this presentation and get started with Garrett.
Thanks, Brittany. Really excited to be here and share some thoughts with all of you. I've spoken with the AMA a few times before, and it's always an awesome audience. Very engaged in the chat. And I really want to encourage you all. It's great watching the chat here where everyone's from. I want to encourage you all to contribute today. You know, if you're sitting there listening to this while doing some work in another tab, I invite you to take a few minutes out of your day and really engage in this conversation. I think that the way that we can get the most out of this conversation today is if we all share our thoughts and what's working for us right now in this new normal. So our topic today is on building brand trust. And it's one of the things that I think is the key to really thriving today in the new normal. But before we jump into that, the real reason why you are all here, you are in the right place. I want you to know that. If I could, I would love to buy you all lunch and sit down and learn your stories. But since we can't do that, I'm going to buy two of you lunch. And so if you stick around to the very end of this presentation today, we will give away 2 Doordash gift cards. That's kind of my thanks to you for being here and sharing your thoughts with us today. So stick around to the end. You got to be present here to win. With that, I want to jump into a discussion. Again, like I said, I don't think anyone is an expert on knowing exactly what to do and how to respond today in this new normal, this environment that we're in. I've done a lot of research into this topic, and I want to share some thoughts that I have from that research, and I want to share what some other marketers are doing, but I also want to hear from you. So here's our first chat discussion. What has been the biggest challenge your organization has faced so far this year in 2020? Feel free to drop it in the chat. Love to hear what your challenges are right now and what you're struggling with so that we can make sure that we can address some of those today. So go ahead and drop those in chat. Looks like we have some of those starting to come in. Budget, moving online, communicating about COVID, rebranding during the pandemic. That's a hard time to do that. A lot of stuff coming in. Budget and marketing cuts is top of mind, building new customers. And I think what we're talking about today is going to address a lot of these concerns that you have. Thank you so much. I love that this chat is so engaged right now. So I want to jump into a poll now too. So you should see the poll on your screen. The question here is, how much has COVID-19 impacted your brand and marketing strategies? Is it a little bit or none? I know that there's some businesses or organizations out there that have had little impact, but for the most of us, there's been a lot of impact. So has it been moderate? Is it strong? Or is it extreme, meaning you're just drastically having to change the way you're even doing business? Perfect. So we're seeing those come in right now. Just another second or two for those polls to come in, and we'll show you all the results. Okay, let's check those out. So it looks like from everyone that responded, the vast majority of you are in the moderate or strong stage. So you're tweaking your focus or messaging, or you're making big changes to your brand and your marketing strategies. You're not alone. I think that's where the majority of people are. 17% of you are drastically having to change how you do business, and only 4% are making little or no changes to your marketing and brand strategies. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And again, I want to encourage you to share some ideas in the chat, because I think that's how we're all going to learn together today. I want to talk about this idea of a brand that people know and trust. I truly believe that a brand that people know and trust is your foundation for everything else, whether it's fundraising or building partnerships or recruiting or revenue and growth or fulfilling your mission as a nonprofit or other type of organization. This has always been important. Building a strong brand that people know and trust has always been important, but it's even more important today in the new normal. There's a company called Edelman who does marketing research and they're a consultancy. And they've put out a lot of research about the impacts of COVID. From a more recent study that they've done, they found that 70% of people say that trusting a brand is more important today than in the past. So as important as this was, a few months ago, it's even more important now. What's really interesting about this statistic is that idea of it's more important today than in the past held consistent across all age groups, all genders, income levels, and all the markets across all the different countries that they polled. So there is a bigger need for brand trust today. And this is from another survey that Edelman did, that they found that how brands or how organizations respond to this pandemic and some of the challenges that our world is facing today will influence future purchase behavior. 65% of people who took this poll has said it will have a huge impact on their likelihood to buy from the brand in the future. So the stakes are high, and we all are feeling that right now, and we're unsure in many cases on how to respond, exactly what to say or what to do. And for that reason, I truly believe that one of the most important investments that an organization can make today is in a strong, consistent brand that people trust. So we're going to talk more about that today, give you some ideas on how to go about doing that. And hopefully, if you're skeptical about this being one of the most important investments, hopefully by the time we get to the end here today, you will believe me when I say that. So let's jump into it. I think before we do, I want to align a little bit more on what does it mean to be a trusted brand? So in Edelman's research, they talked about this. They researched this. They asked people, what does it mean to be a trusted brand? And they found that brand trust is really at the intersection for solving for your customer, solving the problems that they have, as well as issues, societal issues that your customers care about. And it's not just about saying what you're doing, but it's about backing that up, those words with action. So if you really want to build brand trust, it's at the core of all of these things. And building a strong, trusted brand is not just marketing's responsibility. Many organizations feel that way, but the truth is it's not. Everyone across your organization, whether they know it or not, have a role in helping to build or undermine your brand cumulatively over time. So here's some questions I want to dive into and discuss together some more. The first is, what should we be saying and doing right now as brands? And the second is, how can we empower our teams, since everyone plays a role, how can we empower our teams to maintain a unified and consistent brand voice? So first, what should we be saying and doing right now? Here's our next poll. The question is, how concerned are you about doing or saying the wrong thing that may harm your brand image? So right now, many brands are struggling to know exactly what to say. So how concerned is that? How concerned are you about that? How top of mind is that for you? Looks like we're getting a lot of really good responses in right now. Just a minute more here, and we will go to the next slide so you can see these results. Very interesting. All right. So here's the results from everyone that responded. The vast majority of you are very concerned or somewhat concerned. And, I think that that's good. I think that that means that you understand that the stakes are high, that this really matters. But it's also unnerving a little bit to try to figure out, what should we be saying? What should we be doing? So I want to share some thoughts with you about this. But first, I want to hear from you. So what has helped you most in determining your brand's response to COVID-19 and the other issues that our world is facing today? Looks like Katie's saying actions speak louder than words. I think that's great. I think you're absolutely right. Other ideas, what has helped you? Learning from other organizations, other universities or colleges. It's great. I think that these are all wonderful ideas, and I encourage you to share your thoughts here as we continue to go through this today. And as these ideas continue to come in, I want to share some resources that I've found really helpful in helping determine our brand's response to some of the issues we're facing today. The first, and I think many people I've seen some comments kind of refer to this, is to make sure that you know who you are as a brand. What you see here is a screenshot of the one-page front and back document that we use internally at Lucidpress to identify our brand architecture. So when COVID hit, this is something that I refer back to and I dust off and I look at and I make sure that our team really understands that we're solidified on who we are as a brand. So there's lots of different formats that you can go through to identify who you are as a brand. This is one that we use. It outlines the vision for our company, the mission or why do we exist, what we do, a straightforward, clear description of what we do, some of the values that we have as a company, what our core DNA is, what our brand driver is, or the most important core concept around which our brand is aligned, our archetype, which is, the most dominant characteristics, and then list out some personality traits and some attributes of how we want to be experienced as a brand. It's important to make sure that you're aligned behind this and that you're bought in, because that can help determine what you say and do later on. Another resource I found really helpful in doing in looking into this topic and learning what others are doing. Edelman, again, I've shared a lot of resources from them, but they have a lot of really great resources out there. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I think that they've put out some really great resources to help marketers with this. So they put out this worksheet that helps and marketers think through how to consider your immediate, near-term, and long-term actions as an organization. So in the immediate stage, right when a crisis happens, most of us are probably at the tail end of this immediate needs and probably moving into the near-term stage. But right when a crisis like COVID hits, right, in that moment, it's all about what are your actions to address and alleviate the impact of the crisis? How can you make some changes to policy and help ensure that your employees are taken care of? So some questions to ask at the immediate stage is, can your business fill a direct need at this time? Could you join up with other organizations or brands to take collective action? What can you do to ensure that, again, your people are taken care of and you can continue to have employment for them, or that suppliers or others in your value chain are taken care of? How else can you serve the people around you? How can you support communities that you operate in? How can you ensure fulfillment of your goods and services if that's applicable to your business model? As you move into the next stage of, what do you do in the near term? This stage is all about, the first 6 months or so after a crisis happens, like COVID. And it's all about actions that demonstrate your brand's stand on the values that you have in light of the challenges that the world and society is facing. So questions you might ask yourself at this stage. And again, most of us are probably at the beginning of this near-term stage, or will be moving into this stage pretty shortly. So questions you ask here: if you don't have a purpose articulated yet, what's your permission to operate in this space? How can you act? What could you do? If you do have a brand purpose, you need to evaluate, has your role changed or taken on new meaning in light of the recent events? What are your partners and experts saying that they need? And what are they expecting from you? And always be asking, what gap can your brand fill that others can't? What unique value can you provide that can help address some of the issues that society is facing today? And then lastly, as you move into that long-term phase, so this is, 6 months and beyond, this is all about the evolution of your purpose. And there's an opportunity here to design more relevant efforts that meet the needs of some of the changes that have happened in the world. So these are things that are going to be coming up for us in the coming months. Questions to ask at this stage is, what's your brand's role in the new normal? Has it shifted in a meaningful way since before, a crisis happened? What emerging, shifts are likely to impact your long-term purpose? And where you have the license to act bolder and think bigger. So hopefully this has spurred some thoughts of some things you can do and questions that you can address to help your brand know what to say. I want to share some other insights. I reached out to some of my network. I reached out on LinkedIn and some other social media platforms, and I found some what people were saying. I asked people what they found to be most helpful and successful that that companies and marketing teams are doing right now to address this new normal. One thing that I found is that brand reassurances have become a joke for many people. Right? You have probably seen some of these, or you've probably experienced some of these things. There's some tweets out there like Open's freezer, note falls out. Here at Totina's Pizza Rolls, we here at Totina's Pizza Rolls know you've been wondering about our response to COVID-19, right? So some of these are just humorous, right? Because we wouldn't expect it. But the truth is we've all experienced this as consumers the last few months. We've been bombarded. Many of you probably have inboxes that look like that on the right at some point, where it was just every single brand that you've ever interacted with has some message about their response to COVID, right? I like Christopher Doyle's tweet here where he said, "My health and safety is the top priority of so many brands I never even knew had my personal email address." I'm sure many of us have experienced this. But the truth is when we then put on our marketing hats and we think about our own brands, we're unsure about how to respond and what to say. So many brands are doing exactly this and following in the place of everyone else and not really thinking through how to do it better. And the problem with that is that it can feel hollow or inauthentic if it's said too much or if it's said in the wrong way. Again, I asked my network out there what they found to be most helpful and successful. And I thought this was really insightful from Brett here up on the top left. His response to my question was, can I say what hasn't worked for me? Tying everything to COVID, protests, etc. I know that they want to be relevant, referring to brands and companies out there. But watching TV to relax gets really depressing when every ad seems to be about how bad the world is right now. Even the uplifting ads on the same topic don't really help. How about a sense of normalcy sometimes? I'll buy that. And then Leon down here, just frustrated that with all the "we are here for you" emails out there, just from some brand that he bought something from years ago. So again, we notice some of these challenges. We've probably realized these things as consumers, but what do we say? What is the actual right thing that we should be saying right now? I really liked this quote from a Fast Company article that I found. It says, "The best way that brands should be responding is if they actually have something to say or contribute. Our patience for marketing fluff is low at the best of times, but now it's positively toxic. Tell us about your policy or service changes. Help us with discounts or charitable drives. Tell us how you're taking care of your workers." Two things about this quote really stand out to me. The first is say something if you actually have something to say or contribute. Don't just say something just to say something and fill the gap in the air and the space just because you think you should. And lastly, that last line here talks about really talking about what you're doing about the problems and the issues. So that moves into kind of our next phase of what should we be saying, what should we be doing? The key here is make sure you're doing something and then talk about what you're doing to really add value. Again, on the messaging piece here, strike the right balance with your messaging and make sure that you're true to your brand values. That's why that first tip that I shared is making sure that you know who you are as a brand, because you have to make sure that that messaging and the action aligns with that brand. Andrew here responded to my question too, and I really liked what he said. He said, "The strategy I've appreciated the most has been a good middle ground where the advertising company addresses the context of this time without hitting it really heavy. An example would be companies that have announced that they now have contactless payment without having to let me know that they're, quote, trying so hard in these unprecedented times to meet my needs better than they ever have before. When people or companies do that," he says, they've either come across as completely tone deaf or sentimental to the point of appearing completely disingenuous. And I totally agree here with Andrew. I think he makes a really good point here. And many of us have probably experienced this as consumers. One more quote here before we move on to what we do. This is from Ryan Koo, who's the head of brand strategy and innovation at an agency called 11. He said, "This is an instructive moment for brands as they consider their go-forward posture on marketing, messaging, and customer engagement. The takeaway for brands is to be helpful, relevant, informative, constructively distracting, or authentically compassionate." I really like the idea of constructively distracting or authentically compassionate. The takeaway for me in that is not every brand has to play the hero in this. Some brands, their role might be to be constructively distracting in the right way, if that is what aligns with their brand values and what they offer, right? And so finding the right way that your brand can play a role is key in this. We all don't have to act and respond in the same way. A lot of that is determined by what our brand is at our core and the unique value that we can provide. So again, more importantly, what we say is what we do right now. And I want to share some ideas from what other marketers are trying. So Mari here works at a software company. She said, we decided to stop selling our software mid-March through June 1st and gave away access for free, shifting our focus to try to get as many people using it and getting value from it as we could in that time. It worked, and we saw an outsized June. It's actually shifted how we approach trials completely, and we've shifted all of our copy and messaging away from free trial to get free access. And the result has been that we're more customer and outcome oriented. I love that. From the minute someone requests access, in the sales conversation has shifted away from does it work? Do you want to buy? To do you want to keep using it? Are you getting enough value? It's also helped build trust. There's that piece again, building trust with our existing customers. We gave them unlimited access during that time, and we've seen several upgrades since then. So a couple really great things that I really like about what Mari is saying here. First, they thought about what do they do? They gave away their software for free, and they tried to add value because that's what they had in their arsenal, right? And as they shifted their messaging away, they found that one of the great benefits of challenges and crises like this is that we often are forced to become more customer and outcome oriented. That's what she found. The result of that is more trust, and they had an outsized June. They've seen those sales come back and the wins from that. Here's another idea. Bradley Davis, he responded to my question and said that they have doubled down on customer success and relationships. And when I asked him to share more details, he said that they sell to apartment owners that have residents that live in those apartments as their customers. So during this time, they've reached out to the property staff at those locations and provided them and their residents with meals and gift cards to help anyone that was struggling, as many people have been laid off and have been struggling. That personal touch, he said, solidified us as a partner they wanted to work with and opened up doors for more of their portfolio. So again, I love that example because they thought about their customers and the unique challenges that their customers might be facing and the value that their customers could provide to their customers, right? And by doing that, by providing some of those gift cards, they really helped to show their trust and build that trust with action and show their loyalty to their customers there. So again, I want to hear from you. I've seen a lot of really great ideas come through in our chat, but what's been working for your brand? What have been the most impactful changes you've made to your brand or your marketing strategies over the last few months? I want to hear some more stories from you. I love seeing these come in. And again, I think that this is the way that we can all learn together on this topic as we share collective knowledge. No one is really an expert on this topic. We're all trying to navigate this situation at the same time. So the more we can collaborate and share, the better outcome we will all get to. So as more of you are sharing your thoughts and ideas in chat, I just want to sum this up, some takeaways from what we just talked about on what to say and what to do. First, on what to say, make sure that you're helpful, relevant, informative, constructively distracting, or authentically compassionate. A lot of it aligns with who you are as a brand. Be real, be human, be true to your brand values. Know who you are as a brand. Don't just follow what other brands are saying. Know when to take the middle ground, when to speak up, and when to stop talking. That's a challenge, but it's important to evaluate that and think about that. A big takeaway here, though, is to say something. Don't be silent during this time. And then what should we be doing? Well, you should be making sure that you know who you are as a brand. You need to be defining your immediate, near-term, and long-term actions like we talked about. That Edelman worksheet is a really great example with some of those questions to ask yourself in each of those stages. You need to support, serve, and add value in ways that naturally and authentically align with your brand. Not every brand needs to play the hero. And most importantly, you need to do something. Don't be absent. Remember that a brand trust is earned by what you say and what you do. All right, shifting into this last question that we have here. How can we empower our teams while maintaining a unified and consistent brand voice? I want to give some context, even backing up before COVID, to really help paint the picture for why this is such a challenge. We live in a new age of, even before COVID, where what we call the content economy, where there is a demand for content that is constantly increasing. If you work at a company that's growing and more employees are being hired, you've seen this demand for content increasing. And it feels like for many of us that COVID and some of the other issues have only accelerated that demand for content. Have you felt that? I know I've felt that, and many other marketers out there have as well. The truth is also everyone at our organizations have become a content creator. So whether it's vendors, partners, salespeople, employees, they're creating a variety of content across web, email, print, direct mail, social media, all different channels for an increasingly fragmented audience. That only complicates this a little bit more. Again, thinking about how do we keep everyone unified and on brand, but still empower them to create. This study found that creative teams are producing 10 times the volume of content than in previous years. It's just not sustainable. How do you keep up with that, right? The other thing that's more challenging here is that it's getting harder and harder for the content that we create to break through the noise. It's not enough today to just put out a piece of content to show up. You know, you can see some of the average ads, just looking at advertisements that people have seen per day. You've probably seen these stats before. In 1984, the average person saw about 2,000 ads per day. By 2007, it was estimated to be about 5,000 ads per day. And a more recent study found that it could be anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 ads per day. So just putting some piece of content out there and hoping that people see it doesn't work. How do you break through the noise? Well, in order to break through the noise, you need to make sure that the content that you create and share is effective. And what do I mean by effective content? Well, I really think that effective content meets the needs of your customers. It's relevant. It adds value for them. Effective content meets the needs of your team. So if it's a salesperson, for example, and they have a need for a specific piece of content, they have a need. They need that content to do something. They also have context on the market that they're trying to serve with that content, that they need to be represented in that content, right? Your brand, right? Making sure that it's on brand, that it's consistent, right? And it's unified. There's some needs there. And of course, needs of the business or the organization that you serve. Whether it's you need that content to help produce leads or sales or something else, right? And so effective content is really at the intersection of all of these things. And consistent effective content is really what can help build brand trust. And brand trust can help lead to loyalty, engagement, and advocacy. Again, referring back to some of the research that Edelman has done, they found that referring to loyalty, 75% of people with high brand trust say they'll buy a brand's product, even if it isn't the cheapest. Engagement, 60% of people with high brand trust say they pay attention to the brand's communications. Again, easier to stand out with all the noise going on. And again, advocacy, 78% with high brand trust say they'll likely share or repost content about the brand. They'll recommend the brand to others, and they'll defend the brand against criticism. So when you can create effective content, it builds that brand trust. That brand trust leads to loyalty, engagement, and advocacy. And when you can have those things, that leads to increased market share. So whether it is you're a university that's trying to recruit more students to come, right? Or you're a real estate agency that's trying to sell more homes, or you're a software company that's trying to sell more products online, whatever it is, the goal for most of us is how do we increase market share? How do we grow? How do we progress? How do we meet the demands of our market more effectively? And the core of this is effective content leading to brand trust. So here's our next poll. And I know we're getting close on time here, but I want to hear from you. On average, how much of the content that your organization produces would you say is effective? So go ahead and tell us right now on the screen, what do you think? How much of your content is effective? Less than 25%? 25 to 50? 50 to 75, or more than 75%? Great. Love seeing all of these come in right now. Perfect. All right, let's check out some of these results. Most of you are saying, less than 25% or 25 to 50% of all the content is effective. 32% of you say it's somewhere between half and 3/4 of the content is effective. Only 4% of you think that more than 75% of your content is effective, right? It's challenging to truly create effective content. And it takes a full team effort. Siloed efforts like what we see here. We often call it the brand prison or the Wild West. The brand prison is where you have a central marketing team and they say, hey, we're the experts on the brand. Send us all your requests and we'll create the content for you. The problem with that, though, is that you don't have the context that employee or team member has. It might not meet the needs of your customer or your business. Again, you need to get all of those people at the table in order to create effective content. The Wild West might just be saying, all right, you create whatever you want. So maybe that salesperson on the front lines, they create their own content because they have the context of what their market needs, but they might not have the experience or context of what the brand needs. And so it's off brand. And so really creating effective content is all about a full team effort. I found this survey pretty interesting. This is from a survey from Binder that they did about branding in COVID, in the times that we're facing right now with COVID. They asked, what's the top challenge your team is facing while collaborating remotely? And really a lot of it's about informational collaboration. There's been a loss of that. Getting the work done with all the fewer people and resources. I know many people mentioned that it's harder with budgets and smaller teams right now. So it's only been more challenging to collaborate today during COVID and all the other challenges that we're facing. So how do you get all of those people at the table, again, to create effective content? The truth is, in the content economy today, there's going to be winners and losers also. The losing organizations are those that are either going to limit the creators, say, hey, we're the marketing team, we're going to create all the content. They're going to silo teams, and as a result, they're going to create ineffective content that stunts their growth. On the flip side, though, the winning organizations are those that find ways to empower their creators, scale the expertise that everyone has, whether it's on the brand or whether it's on the market or the business, and then create really relevant, effective content that builds lasting brands and brand trust. And we really believe that the solution for that, I believe that the solution for that is what we call brand templating. And brand templating is all about empowering everyone, all the brand stakeholders out there with the resources that they need to create on-brand content quickly, efficiently, and in an on-brand way. And really believe that that's the solution today for thriving in this new content economy, especially with the impacts that we're facing with COVID-19. So as we break down brand templating a little bit more, I want to give you a quick overview of what this looks like. First, it's making sure that as an organization, you create a library of easy to find templates of all the pieces of content that people might need to create. It might be emails, it might be print, it might be social media, it might be, you name it. Every company is a little bit different, but making sure you have templates for those things that are requested most often and the assets that people would need to customize those. So that might be pre-written copy snippets, or it might be your logos or brand fonts and colors, things like that. Next is, and this is a crucial piece of brand templating, making sure that you can lock down elements of your brand on those templates. By locking things down, we're not reverting back to that brand prison where we say, hey, we're the marketing team, we'll create everything. You're not doing that. You're still empowering people to create, but you're giving them the guardrails that they need to succeed. So you lock down your logo so they can't tweak it or change it on accident. But maybe you lock down a text box and enforce your brand fonts and colors in the position of that, but allow them to swap out the copy in that text box. And then lastly, as you have these templates and assets and they're locked down, you then empower everyone across your organization, even non-designers, to customize those templates with approved assets and the expertise that they might have about their particular market that they're serving, and share that finalized content. And so really going back to this idea that we shared at the beginning, building a strong, trusted brand is not just marketing's responsibility, it's everyone's. And by setting up a brand templating system like this, you can empower everyone to contribute in helping to build the brand over time in an effective way without deteriorating the brand by creating content that doesn't meet the needs of the brand and doesn't help build that trust. Brand templating really can empower your team to create that effective content that increases brand trust. And again, that's why, going back to this idea that we shared at the very beginning, that's why I really believe that the most important investment an organization can make today is in a strong, consistent brand that people trust. So hopefully what we've shared today has started to give you some ideas about what to say, what to do, and how to empower your organization to contribute to this process of creating content and putting stuff out there on behalf of your brand in a consistent way that helps build that trust over time. Thank you so much for all of your engagement in the chat today and for your participation in our polls. I think that that's really where the true value has been in this presentation today, is all of the insights that you have all brought to the table. So with that, the time that you've all been waiting for, our DoorDash gift cards. Here we go. So if you're here, just respond in the chat. And we want to make sure that you're here so we can email you afterwards with this gift card. The first DoorDash winner here, if I get a little virtual drum roll, if you're wherever you're at, give me a little drum roll on your desk. Here we go. All right. The first one is Keith Chamberlain from HFMA. Keith, are you here? Congratulations, Keith. You are our first DoorDash winner. Our next winner, little drum roll, here we go. Our next winner is Kelsey Flinko from Culkin Ginsburg Company. Kelsey, I saw you. I know there's a lot of chats going on right now, but Kelsey, I saw you. Congratulations on that. And as we wrap up here today, before we get to our Q&A, I want to just let you all know, I know we only had time to breeze over this idea here at the end of brand templating and what that looks like. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, I'm going to be doing another webinar about this topic of brand templating, where we can dive in a little bit deeper and talk more about the specifics of that. So we'd love for you to join. It's a free webinar. Feel free to go to that bit.ly link and check it out. And we'd love to have you if you're interested in learning more about this topic. And with that, Brittany, I think we are ready for some questions.
All right, great. So your first question came in from Megan. What resources have you read or watched that have helped you learn and grow with your own knowledge on brand?
That's a great question. There's a lot out there. I referred a lot to some of the research that Edelman's put out there. They do a lot of research on the topic of branding and why building a strong brand, a consistent brand, and brand trust is important. I think they're an excellent resource. I think that there's also a lot of different resources out there. I try to watch certain marketers or certain companies who I think do branding well and see what they're talking about, what's top of mind for them. And then lastly, I feel really fortunate. I actually host a weekly podcast where I get to interview marketers and people who are building brands, who are in the trenches at some of the companies and organizations that might be a little bit under the radar. And I get to pick their brains on some of the things that are top of mind. So I know everyone doesn't have that opportunity, but that's been one of the things that's been most helpful for me, to just hear what people are talking about and what's top of mind for them. So I'd put in a plug that if you're interested in learning more about your market, start a podcast, even if it's a thing on the side that you do, because it's an excellent opportunity to interview someone and learn from their expertise.
All right, that's great advice. And next in from Kim, for brand templating, how do you manage if others in your organization aren't creatively inclined? Great question.
It's a great question. I think that's where that step 2 that we went over very quickly kind of came in. Which was step 2 is all about locking down important elements of your brand on templates, right? When you can position it to someone who is not necessarily creative, but they might have some expertise on what should be included in that market. They have some needs about what, that content should contain. When you can position it in that way, where they're just providing their expertise and just putting it into a template to customize it briefly, it makes it really simple. They don't have to worry about designing it or creating it. All they're doing is customizing it to meet the needs of their audience. And when you've locked it down, you've simplified it, given them the guardrails that they need to be successful in that. And so it takes some coaching sometimes and some encouragement, but when you can set it up in that way and they can see how quickly and easily they can create something that really meets the needs of their audience, oftentimes I've found that that's when they get really excited about it and want to do it more and more.
All right, perfect. So in from Maria, in this pandemic, COVID-19, what can be a key strategic decision to reshape or refresh your brand?
That's a very good question. One of the things I would do is make sure, as you're evaluating who you are as a brand, that you do that outside of the context of COVID. I think it's important to understand who are you at your core as a brand and what do you care about, despite all the craziness that's happening in the world with COVID and everything else. And once you've identified who you are at your core, then you can go back to some of those questions that we referred to in that Edelman worksheet and think about, based on the challenges that the world's facing, is there anything we need to tweak or change about our brand positioning that will help us to be more relevant in this time? But I think the key to that is making sure that you start by looking at who are you at your core. A lot of times I found that, the brand of an organization is like the average or collective personality of all the people who work there, or especially some of the top executives who work there. So if you look at what their kind of average personality is, a lot of times that helps you start getting at who you are as a brand, true to who you are as a brand and an organization. And then you can apply the lens of COVID and everything else.
All right. And then this is a great follow-up question from Karen.
Sounds like you cut out there a little bit, Brittany. Can you redo that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is in from Karen, and she wants to know, what are your thoughts on how to help C-suite convert their mindset from being focused on short-term sales versus long-term brand strategies?
It's a great question. It's a big challenge that a lot of marketing teams face. There's a lot of really great research out there that talks about the financial impact of great design and strong brands. So a couple of those that come to mind, if you look up the Design Management Institute, DMI, they actually did a research study a few years ago where they looked at design-centric companies who happen to also be some of the world's strongest, most valuable brands. Companies like Target and Disney and IBM and Nike, right? So some of the most design-centric companies in the S&P 500, and they compared the financial performance over the course of 10 years compared to their peers who weren't as design-centric or brand-focused. And they actually found that the design-centric, brand-focused companies outperformed their peers financially by as much as 2-to-1. And so there's been other studies since then. McKinsey did a study about 2 years ago that found the exact same thing. And so when you can find some of that research, it kind of depends on who that executive is and what's going to help them kind of understand. If they're a person that wants the research, give them the research, show them the data of why this is important, because it's out there. And there's a real financial reason for building a strong, consistent brand.
All right. And I'm going to squeeze in one more question for you before we wrap up. So this question is from Megan. So how do you, and this is sort of along the same lines, how do you educate leadership and increase brand knowledge across the organization? How do you sort of pitch this to them? Do you use a presentation? Do you use research? What are some of the things that you coach some of your smaller organizations to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a key piece of this is that it needs to be ongoing education. And so it doesn't really matter how you do it. It doesn't matter if it's a presentation or a flyer or an in-person conversation. It probably needs to be all of it. And it needs to be an ongoing conversation that you consistently have. I think as marketers, one of the most underutilized marketing channels that we often forget about is internal marketing. And so when we can really focus on developing a really good internal marketing strategy to help people understand the importance of building a strong, consistent brand that people trust, the impacts of that over the long term are going to be tremendous.
All right. So audience, let's go ahead and give Garrett a virtual round of applause by saying thank you in the studio chat. Garrett, do you have any final thoughts or comments you want to leave with us today?
Just again, want to say thank you. I think that the chat has been awesome today. I loved all the participation. And again, that's really where I think the real value from this has come. So thank you for letting me help facilitate some of the ideas and conversations today. Appreciate it.
All right. And thank you again We want to remind the audience that we will be exiting you into the Lucidpress booth so that you can interact with their team and check out all of their resources. Our next presenter will begin at 12:15 p.m. Central Time, who is Vincent Williams. So we hope to see you at the next presentation. And again, thank you so much, Lucidpress, for sponsoring this session. Such great information. And we'll see everyone back in just a few moments.
Thanks, Brittany.